All war conflicts are hell, but there was one that literally had it at its feet. We are talking about the Vietnam War, in which explosive mines on the battlefield ground claimed the lives of thousands of American soldiers in a bloody and relentless manner. These devices were one of the Vietnamese's secret weapons to win the war. The eastern jungle was already naturally hostile, and with the distribution of these hidden deadly mechanisms throughout the terrain, it was only a matter of time before the lives of American soldiers were taken one by one. In today's video, we will determine the types of traps and strategies used by the Viet Cong and delve into the consequences for the soldiers. Get ready for a journey into a hostile jungle, and be very careful where you step in this new and dangerous installment of military history. In the 1960s, in the heart of Southeast Asia, a conflict erupted that would mark a generation and change the history of Americans and Vietnamese. The Vietnam War, a battle between two opposing ideologies, materialized into an armed conflict of extraordinary dimensions, left deep scars on the land where it happened and in the hearts of those who lived through it. Amidst the lush Vietnamese jungle, the war took a brutal turn. American forces found themselves fighting not only against a fierce adversary, but also an invisible one, camouflaged among the foliage and willing to employ tactics that defied all convention. Contrary to popular belief that the North Vietnamese Army and the Viet Cong were inferior to U.S. forces in skill and firepower, the reality is that their deadly ingenuity and creative tactics made them equally lethal. The jungles of Vietnam became a treacherous stage for locals and foreigners alike. Every step was a deadly gamble, where the price was life itself. Every shadow could conceal the threat of an ambush. And in this setting, explosive traps emerged, nothing less than deadly puzzles created to sow chaos and casualties among enemy ranks. Deadly devices hidden beneath dense vegetation, these explosive traps became the weapon of choice for those fighting from their impenetrable hideouts. From simple landmines to complex traps with sharp spikes and deadly poisons, the territory dominated by the Viet Cong became a lethal and unpredictable minefield. Each trek among the trees, mosquitoes, and unbearable heat was a test of resilience, not just physical but also mental. The roar of artillery, the crunch of branches underfoot, and the constant threat of explosive traps created an environment where survival depended on cunning and inner strength, qualities not all soldiers possessed. It's worth noting that not all American fighters were seasoned troops. Many were young individuals with basic training sent to fight out of obligation, and they found themselves terrified amidst engagements with Vietnam's rebel forces.
You got your squad and tie in to the left.
For these reasons, while soldiers fought on the front lines, the war also raged in the homes and streets of America. The Vietnam War divided opinions, sparking protests and questioning the morality and justification of military intervention. As the war dragged on, the emotional toll and loss of lives led to a shift in perspective in American society and the pressure it exerted on government authorities. The withdrawal of U.S. troops marked the end of an era, but the aftermath of the war persisted, both in Southeast Asia and in the global consciousness. One of the most serious consequences of the conflict was the maiming caused by the monstrous traps of the Vietnamese. Let's explore a bit the design of these devices and why they were so effective and deadly. In the dark theater of war, military traps can become deadly shadows, designed to trigger tragedy with a simple oversight. Imagine a scenario where every step you take could be your last. That was Vietnam War. The jungle was plagued with these ingenious and lethal devices that caused death by exploiting the most natural human behaviors: habit, self-preservation, curiosity, or even greed. In the green eastern expanses, deadly spikes, explosive bombs, and sinister metal traps awaited the carelessness or self-preservation instinct of soldiers. For example, when attacked by gunfire, combatants would hit the ground or run, only to be killed by cleverly hidden traps. Mastery in placing these mechanisms lies in offering seemingly simple solutions to problems that can arise in any armed confrontation. An open door in a seemingly safe building could be a refuge when a squad is ambushed by enemy fire. The problem is that it's likely a decoy leading directly to a deadly trap. This is where military technology comes into play. Devices like the versatile and lethal M142 or the Yugoslav UMNO P1, designed to trigger explosives in various ways, from trap wires to direct pressure or tension release. Most of these mines contain between 250 grams and 1 kilogram of explosives, enough to end one or several lives in an instant. Their action radius, sometimes as small as 1 meter, made them indiscriminate weapons, unleashing chaos and suffering impersonally and without any remorse. But the price to pay was high, as the traps did not discriminate against their victims. They affected civilians and non-combatants, leaving scars that lasted long after the conflict. It even led to unfortunate instances of friendly fire. The use against civilians was prohibited by international laws, which sought to discourage their use. But in the harsh reality of the battlefield, these traps claimed the lives of thousands of people. The Viet Cong had a variety as sinister as it was spectacular of these artifacts. Some were strictly designed for effectiveness, while others were designed sadistically to generate pain and fear in enemy troops. These ingenious and deadly creations were designed to lurk and surprise, taking the conflict to new levels of terror. Let's look at some of the most outstanding and chilling models of Vietnamese deadly mines.
One individual being injured takes out 2 other people at one time. But everyone else in that squad is going to have to take their turn of carrying this individual and his equipment. So you've limited their combat effectiveness right off the bat. So if you can get 1 or 2 or even 3 people injured in that squad, then you've either limited or destroyed their combat effectiveness. That unit is no longer viable.
Deadly dance of the bamboo whip. In the dense Vietnamese jungles, the Viet Cong unleashed its fury with explosive traps of the bamboo whip. The enemy camouflaged clever devices made with elastic bamboo sticks, armed with sharp plates and connected to trap wires. When the trap was triggered, the sharp end would violently rotate, reaching the legs and torsos, piercing the chest and limbs of unsuspecting soldiers. A macabre ballet that left indelible scars on those who dared to cross its lethal path if it didn't take their lives.
This is a pivoting leg trap. You've got a stepping plate here. This right here is the pivot, and on this end, the punji stakes. Be covered over with a lattice work and of course camouflaged. As you walk by, someone steps into the trap, their own body weight powers the trap, pushing it up and striking them.
The stealth of death, mudball mines. The insidious mudball mines hid their true power under a layer of mud or clay, baked in the sun. With M26 and M33 grenades at their core, the Viet Cong removed the safety of the hand grenade and concealed it in a deceptive shell, a fragile casing just a few centimeters thick. When stepped on, the mud hideout would break, releasing a deadly explosion. A perfect camouflage that kept soldiers constantly at risk, even in seemingly harmless terrain. Shots from the shadows, cartridge explosive traps. In a sinister twist, cartridge explosive traps replaced the classic explosion with a precise shot. Made with simple components available in any Vietnamese barracks, these modified landmines used a small bamboo tube, a nail, wood, and ammunition, usually a rifle assault bullet. When the trap was stepped on, the primer struck the nail, firing the projectile directly at the intruder's foot. This lethal fusion of ingenuity and brutality could injure American soldiers, or, depending on the victim's position relative to the shot, end their life. The hidden horror in the grass, punji sticks. Vietnamese fighters wove their malevolent web of stakes, often impregnated with infectious substances like spider or snake venom, throughout the territory. They dug holes, concealed the spikes, and covered the ensemble with a subtle layer of grass. Beneath the apparent calm of the vegetation, punji sticks awaited their chance to unleash terror among the Americans. Sharpened bamboo stakes hidden in buried boxes or camouflaged with grass became deadly traps. Whether in improvised ambushes or under false bridges, these cunning ploys left soldiers exposed to invisible and ruthless danger. The victim, upon crossing the cover, fell directly onto the spikes, with no chance of avoiding the tragedy. While many of the injuries they caused were not necessarily fatal, in the context of warfare in the middle of the jungle, it could render troops defenseless against an enemy offensive or a slow and painful death from a wound infection. In other instances, the ploys were much more savage and disgusting.
One of the more effective ways this was used was after this would be shaped, is that it'd be filled with human excrement. And that way anyone who fell on this would also have the human excrement imparted into the wound and just starts horrendous infection.
Snake pits, deadly deception in the jungle. The wildest and boldest Viet Cong guerrillas carried handfuls of poisonous snakes to sow chaos. They tied these deadly creatures to a bamboo cane and hid them in complex tunnels that traversed the jungle's internal paths. This bamboo cane was hidden in the ground as bait and was kicked by unsuspecting victims who walked cautiously and desperately, looking at the horizon and the trees in search of enemies but forgetting to look down. Upon kicking the bamboo lattice, the snakes would launch themselves, attacking the enemy. These vermin were known as three-step snakes because that was the distance a bitten soldier could cover before the venom claimed their life. Ambushes in the air, anti-helicopter traps. Even in the skies, American soldiers found no safe haven. Huey helicopters, used to insert troops and evacuate the wounded, were the target of ingenious anti-helicopter traps. Grenades, projectiles, and explosives waited among the trees, activated by trapwires. A chilling reminder that war in Vietnam knew no bounds, not even in the heights. Flag bombs, hidden danger in war standards. The National Vietnamese Navy and the Viet Cong exploited the American desire to capture enemy flags. Americans believed in cultural battle and wanted to eliminate any trace of the enemy, which would ultimately become a weakness that caused countless casualties. The Easterners, aware of the enemy troops' desire, placed explosives in the flags that were triggered upon being touched. Any attempt to move the flagpole or the flag detonated the charge, turning the act of symbolic victory into certain death. The mace, the hammer of destiny. The mace, considered the most terrifying and gruesome trap in the entire Vietnamese arsenal, seemed to come straight out of the most twisted of cartoons. Its premise was as simple as it was brutal. When a victim tripped over the metal cable that activated the mechanism, it released a 20-kilogram metal or wooden ball filled with spikes hanging from a tree, causing a death as automatic as it was horrific to whoever was underneath the device. The most terrible part was when soldiers found the mangled bodies of their comrades who had suffered the consequences of this macabre engineering device.
Always available, gravity generates velocity. When a spiked bamboo trap is pulled high in the air, it accelerates towards the ground when released. Velocity plus mass plus sharpened spikes equals death from above.
There was a variation of this trap called the tiger trap, which instead of dropping a deadly spiked ball, involved being crushed by bricks and poisoned metal darts. Both deaths were equally unbearable and desperate. As mentioned earlier, while the goal of these mines was to eliminate the enemy, they sometimes did not achieve their objective 100%, leaving the lives and bodies of some soldiers torn forever. Let's talk a little about the devastating legacy of the traps of the Vietnam War. In the scorching August of 1970, Gordon S. Wise, a 20-year-old soldier from Minneapolis, lay in his hospital bed in Chu Lai, Vietnam. From that place, he whispered for them to write one last letter to his family, a farewell echoing with the tragedy's resonance. Just 2 days after his emotional message, Wise departed from this world, having fallen victim to one of the deadly anti-personnel mines that infested the Vietnamese landscape. The conflict in Vietnam went beyond the conventional narrative of war, earning the title of the War of Mines and Explosive Traps for military strategy specialists. The Viet Cong, aware of their inferiority in firepower, unleashed a deadly arsenal of mines and traps, transforming the terrain into an unpredictable battlefield. This strategy basically consisted of leveraging knowledge of the territory and the hostility of the environment to automatically disadvantage the Americans, reversing the scenario. Something akin to the Battle of Thermopylae waged by the Spartans. The first American soldier to succumb in Vietnam fell victim to an anti-personnel mine, almost like an omen, marking the beginning of a ruthless struggle against the unseen. In 1967, a U.S. Army officer reflected in his war diary, "The biggest problem in facing the enemy in Vietnam is not being able to find them to fight them." This statement encapsulated the harsh reality. Mines became invisible enemies, challenging detection and sowing fear at every step. U.S. troops, helpless against this hidden threat, suffered significant losses due to ineffective mine detection techniques, which often ended in troop deaths. Mines, mostly locally homemade, surpassed the counterattack system's ability to detect and destroy them. The Viet Cong, in a bold move, detected American traps and even dared to reuse them against the forces that deployed them. The cruel irony is found in a report containing a Pentagon confession, determining that the enemy relied heavily on American mines to inflict harm. Statistics paint a bleak retrospective picture. In Vietnam, landmines accounted for more than a third of all American casualties. Facing a cunning and unpredictable enemy led to setbacks, disruptions in plans, and disorder in U.S. ranks, so it can be inferred that war tactics based on hidden mines were one of the keys to America's loss in the war. The testimonies of various soldiers reflect the palpable fear that the mines instilled, disrupting American strategies. Despite superiors' efforts to persuade troops that mines could be an advantage since they showed that the enemy feared close combat, the reality was a constant fear of the invisible about to constantly erupt.
United States of America, after each of you, well and faithfully served our great nation.
These traps, woven with ingenuity and desperation, reveal the darkest side of the confrontation between the Viet Cong and the United States, where the confrontation went beyond bullets, delving into the terrifying realm of stealthy murder engineering. Thus, in the treacherous jungle, every step of the United States soldiers was marked by the shadow of death, manifested in these terrifying bloodthirsty mines that defined the brutality of the Vietnam War. The land, once marked by these invisible traps, will forever remember the brutal price of a war where each step could be the last. By the mid-1960s, the war unleashed in Vietnam against communism was yielding devastating results for both sides. The strategy adopted by the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, under the leadership of General William Westmoreland between 1964 and 1968, focused on a simple yet brutal premise: to kill more. The tactic of accumulating enemy casualties as a measure of success in the war was based on the belief that by significantly weakening the adversary, their fighting capacity would erode, ensuring victory. However, in the case of the Vietnam War, this tactic proved ineffective for several reasons. Firstly, the conflict was not limited to a conventional military confrontation, but also involved a complex political and social framework. Secondly, the Viet Cong guerrillas and the North Vietnamese Army enjoyed widespread popular support in many areas of the South, making it difficult to eradicate communism through military force alone. The guerrilla response to the tactic of accumulating casualties was nothing short of a relentless wave of deadly traps and ambushes. These tactics, employed by both the Viet Cong guerrillas and American forces, unleashed a brutal and merciless struggle in the jungle. Are you ready to delve into this tale of terror and bravery? Every trail could become a deadly trap, with booby traps, landmines, or napalm bombs waiting to detonate right before your eyes. Join us in the next military history video where we will unveil the most ferocious ambush tactics that made the Vietnam War one of the bloodiest in history. Let's go into the Vietnamese jungle. The enemy that the Americans encountered was formidable. The Viet Cong, formerly known as the National Liberation Front of South Vietnam, emerged as a powerful communist guerrilla force during the war. Composed primarily of insurgents from the South, they confronted the US-backed government in their struggle to unify the country under a communist regime. Employing meticulously orchestrated guerrilla tactics, the group challenged established military conventions and exploited the dense jungle terrain to launch devastating surprise attacks. Traps became an essential tool of their strategy, serving both as physical and psychological weapons. Punji stakes, simple in design yet deadly effective, consisted of sharpened bamboo sticks concealed under dense vegetation, often poisoned to ensure severe infections for those who fell into them. More elaborate board traps leveraged foot pressure on wood to trigger mechanisms that launched stakes or nails towards unsuspecting soldiers. Everything could conceal a grenade or an anti-personnel mine. Even bridges designed to collapse under the weight of those crossing hid punji stakes in their depths, ready to injure uniformed personnel falling into the water. Additionally, side-closing traps, ingenious in their conception, ensnared soldiers' legs between nail-filled boards, causing debilitating wounds and sowing chaos among enemy ranks. Each deception, however rudimentary it may seem, testified to the Viet Cong's deep knowledge of their environment and their ability to adapt to it. This skill to turn natural resources into lethal weapons not only compensated for the guerrilla group's disadvantage in weaponry and technology, but also played a crucial role in their resistance against the world's most powerful military force. Moreover, the insurgents deployed an invisible terror that deeply affected the minds of American soldiers, surpassing the mere physical threat they posed. This constant fear of the unknown, of making a misstep and triggering a deadly trap, generated a state of paranoia that permeated every jungle patrol. Soldiers moved with extreme caution, aware that the ground beneath their feet could transform into their worst enemy at any moment. The troops' psyche was severely impacted, as the anticipation of omnipresent yet invisible danger undermined morale and weakened combat effectiveness. During the first phase of the conflict in Vietnam, known as the War of Attrition, the search and destroy tactic became the modus operandi. This maneuver involved locating enemy units in the dense jungle, engaging them in combat, bombing them, and then returning to secure zones. It turned out to be a true ordeal, as locating and exterminating the enemy on their own turf was extremely challenging. Despite expecting a quick and decisive victory, the conflict became a nightmare for the American youth, engaged in an increasingly difficult and questionable endeavor. The search and destroy operations not only faced relentless resistance, but also caused physical and emotional strain on the soldiers involved. The impenetrable jungle, hostile climate, and guerrilla tactics further complicated the situation, turning each maneuver into a test of endurance and determination. As the war dragged on and American casualties mounted, questions arose about the effectiveness and morality of the adopted strategy. The previous experience in the Pacific during World War II, where the United States faced jungle warfare, hidden enemies, and ambushes, proved less useful in Vietnam. While in the Pacific, the goals were clear and tangible, such as not yielding any islands, reclaiming territory, and expelling the Japanese. In Vietnam, the objectives tended to blur. The fighting unfolded in a confusing setting with no clear advancements, engaging in combat from village to village in the jungle. The search and destroy strategy led by General Westmoreland was complemented by the brutality of Operation Rolling Thunder, which extended from March 1965 until the Tet Offensive 3 years later. This operation constituted a large-scale ambush where the U.S. Air Force systematically bombed North Vietnam with B-52 napalm bombs, causing massive destruction and leaving a profound psychological impact on the civilian population. Although napalm proved useful for attritional warfare, destroying shelters, tunnels, and trenches hidden underground, as well as instilling fear in the population, Westmoreland's strategy was increasingly trapped in an exchange of corpses. The planned devastation in Vietnam aimed to demoralize the communists, both psychologically and physically. But paradoxically, it became unbearable in the United States, despite the disproportion in casualties between both sides. American democracy could not tolerate such a massacre. Protests were inevitable. On the other hand, Ho Chi Minh's regime spread the narrative that their nation was waging a national liberation war against a foreign invader. From Hanoi, the Vietnamese dictator coordinated actions between the Communist Army and the Viet Cong guerrillas, providing them with logistical support, supplies, new recruits, and weapons. Despite the U.S. Army winning most battles and driving out the guerrillas, they continued to replace their fighters and regain influence in rural areas. American troops found themselves increasingly trapped in an endless labyrinth. Despite overwhelming resource disparity, with the United States deploying advanced technology and formidable arsenals, the Viet Cong responded with deep knowledge of the terrain and cunning, lethal guerrilla tactics. In this challenging scenario, survival and cunning often overshadowed conventional armament superiority. On May 15, 1964, an American battalion-sized detachment fell victim to a devastating Viet Cong ambush. The consequences of the clash were catastrophic, with 60 U.S. troops confirmed dead, 65 wounded, and a staggering total of 135 missing. Casualties like these, in a single day, had not been seen even in the worst moments of World War II. The ambush took place approximately 45 miles southwest of Saigon, in the Mekong Delta province of Kien Hoa, an area increasingly infiltrated by insurgents. According to military intelligence, the guerrilla force involved in the ambush consisted of 2 battalions totaling 800 men. On the other hand, the exact size of the U.S. government squad was difficult to determine, with estimates ranging between 250 and 350 troops. It is worth noting that the American Army included elite units known as Rangers, in addition to regular infantry. These forces were tasked with assisting 2 other companies in pursuing attackers who had previously assaulted a nearby outpost. However, the American troops inadvertently fell into the trap, as recounted by one of the survivors.
The terrain was covered with immense, thick vegetation. And so they had an opportunity to hide until the last minute, which was why a favorite tactic of theirs was the ambush.
The ambush exposed a clear weakness in American counterinsurgency tactics, highlighting a critical gap in their ability to effectively respond to such situations. The Viet Cong had repeatedly used surprise attacks throughout the country with devastating effectiveness, leveraging elements of surprise, camouflage, and speed of attack to achieve success. Unlike frontal engagements where prior planning or air support could be utilized, ambushes offered few opportunities for U.S. forces to call in reinforcements or airstrikes. Just days later, on May 22, 1964, Bravo Company of the 1st Battalion, 4th Marines, departed from Yankee Station eastward along the southern edge of the trace. Their mission was to clear enemy troops east of Route 561. However, after advancing about 400 meters, they fell into an L-shaped ambush set by a unit of the Vietnamese Army. The ambush triggered a devastating barrage of machine gun fire, mortars, and grenades, causing numerous casualties within the first 20 minutes of the battle. Captain Harris, the leader of Bravo Company, died in the confrontation but was credited with maintaining order and discipline, which prevented even greater casualties. For 4 consecutive years, the war escalated, and although Vietnamese casualties multiplied, the American Army, due to the sudden ambushes, became increasingly weakened, physically, psychologically, and morally. By August 25, 1968, amid the monsoon season in Vietnam, a large resupply convoy consisting of 81 trucks from the 48th Transportation Group departed Long Binh, bound for the 1st Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, located near the Cambodian border. Despite adverse weather conditions and warnings of possible enemy attacks, the convoy set out. As they moved along the potholed roads, the trucks were divided into 3 series, with refrigerated vehicles at the front, followed by cargo, fuel, and ammunition vehicles at the rear. Normally, the journey would take a few hours, but the convoy moved at a limited speed of 20 miles per hour due to terrain conditions. The 1st and 3rd Brigades of the 25th Infantry Division typically provided security along the main supply route. But the 3rd Brigade had been diverted to Saigon on orders from the new division commander, Brigadier General Ellis W. Williamson. With only 8 armed military police vehicles to protect the convoy's 81 vehicles, the risk was high. At 11:45 a.m., the convoy passed through the quiet town of Ap Nhi. A column of soldiers from the Army of the Republic of Vietnam marched on the north side of the road, next to the rubber plantation known as Little Rubber. However, these soldiers turned out to be members of the Viet Cong. Suddenly, the guerrillas opened fire. Elements of the North Vietnamese Army's 88th Regiment, who had infiltrated Little Rubber the previous night, also joined the attack. The ambush was intense and well coordinated. The convoy soldiers attempted to defend themselves, but the enemy outnumbered them and was well prepared. They fired rockets, machine guns, and automatic weapons at the vehicles, causing chaos and destruction. Some trucks were hit and began to burn, while others were trapped on the blocked road. Drivers and soldiers who managed to get out of their vehicles took defensive positions, using whatever they could find for cover. However, the situation was desperate. The ambush had been meticulously planned, and the enemy had exploited the lack of security and bad weather to launch a devastating attack. Communications were difficult, and air and artillery support were out of reach. The soldiers faced an unequal struggle as the enemy continued their relentless assault. Before the increase of American troops in the mid-1965 war, it was evident that territorial victory belonged to the guerrillas. However, as offensive operations intensified, the enemy could no longer operate under cover of darkness with impunity. During the night of June 18, 1967, 10 infantry soldiers from the U.S. 196th Light Infantry Brigade set up an ambush 16 kilometers south of Chu Lai in Quang Ngai Province as part of Task Force Oregon's efforts to secure the base complex of that strategic city. Led by 2nd Lieutenant Truman P. Sullivan and Sergeant Lloyd E. Jones, the squad prepared to surprise assault enemy terrorists operating in the area. The location was strategically chosen near two villages, Phuocan 1 and Phuocan 2, where local Viet Cong had been causing terror. The squad, under Sergeant Jones's leadership, was well equipped and prepared for the mission, carrying rifles, grenades, and other necessary equipment. Positioned in four, the group established security forces on the east and right flanks, with Sergeant Nobles leading the latter. Command led by Jones oversaw the operation from the center. As night fell, the squad patiently awaited the enemy's approach. When 6 Viet Cong soldiers rushed into the trap, the Americans acted swiftly. Jones detonated a claymore mine, instantly eliminating one enemy Vietnamese. The squad then confronted the rest of the Viet Cong with gunfire and grenades. Despite sporadic fire, the elite team maintained control of the situation. With the mission accomplished and 2 soldiers wounded, Sergeant Jones ordered a retreat from the trap site to avoid possible guerrilla reinforcements. The squad returned to the base camp without further incidents, effectively countering the threat in the area. Since that last assault, the war continued its bloody course without major developments, except for the My Lai massacre on March 16, 1968. Despite the government and military's efforts to maintain public support and the narrative of a just and necessary war, reports of atrocities committed in My Lai undermined any argument in favor of military intervention in Vietnam. On this tragic day, American soldiers from the United States Army, under the command of Lieutenant William Calley Jr., entered the village of My Lai in Quang Ngai Province and perpetrated an indiscriminate massacre of civilians, including women, children, and the elderly. The operation was triggered under the mistaken belief that the village harbored Viet Cong members. However, the soldiers encountered no resistance and proceeded to massacre over 500 unarmed civilians. This act of atrocious brutality not only shocked the world, but also led many soldiers to confront deep ethical and moral dilemmas. The soldiers knew they were fighting a war without popular support.
And I understand that it was an unpopular war. But the guys that went there, even if they were drafted, boy, they fully believed in coming out of there alive. They fully believed in what they were doing. And yes, we were probably seeing on the other side of the political battle there, we had to believe that we could win that war.
Although some veterans may have maintained a more traditional view of heroism and duty during the conflict, for many others, the experience of My Lai and other similar atrocities shed light on the moral complexity of war. Ultimately, the withdrawal of American troops in 1973 and the fall of Saigon in 1975 marked the end of a long and costly offensive that left a legacy of suffering and division on both sides. Ambushes, with their ability to level the playing field between a conventional army and a guerrilla force, stood out as an effective tactic that challenged conventional combat strategies. beyond their military impact, they represented the resistance of a determined people defending their land and independence. That concludes the video. If this report on the Vietnam War has intrigued you, we encourage you to subscribe to receive similar content in future editions of Military History.